afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Kelly Franklin, the social media manager here at N26. I'm with our CTO, Patrick Kua. So, Patrick, give us a little introduction. What were you doing before N26?
Sure. So I'm an engineer at heart. I've been working in technology for more than 16 years, and probably for a majority of my career, I've been working in consulting. And consulting meant really helping other companies get better at building software, helping organizations understand how to set up structures for building software. And I've published a number of books as well in terms of technical leadership, about building evolutionary architectures and retrospecting, which is the heart of kind of how I think about continuous improvement.
A man of many hats.
Indeed.
And so I know there's no such thing as a typical day at N26, but could you maybe tell us a usual day for a member of the tech team?
Yeah, so I mean, we have a lot of people in tech and they all work on a number of different products, but if I was to maybe generalize around how our tech team works, they kind of work in cross-functional teams. So it means that engineers are part of a team with sort of product people, design people, all working towards a particular goal. We work in sort of an agile fashion, so this means we sort of work in team-based style. And it means that teams have a way of sort of synchronizing. So a lot of teams have a sort of daily stand-up where they talk and synchronize around what are the things that they're currently working on, what are the impediments that people might be sort of needing help with, and how they can sort of help each other, and dispersing sort of information around. We try to give, I guess, teams a lot of time to actually focus on building sort of software, so we try to limit the number of meetings, but inevitably in any sort of organization you need to agree on how things are done, and particularly as you have dependencies across teams, you have some people that sort of go to different types of meetings. We have pretty relaxed hours, so some teams come in at sort of 10 and they stay until sort of 6. There's definitely a lot of coffee breaks and lunch breaks, and Wednesday we have a sort of brown bag lunch where everyone gets lunch, and then somebody presents something about what's going on in the company, which is a super exciting way we spread sort of knowledge. If it's a Friday, we really encourage people to celebrate what they've done. So we have a tradition at N26 called Friday Celebrations, where I encourage anyone when they've shipped a new product or a new feature to really showcase that off to the entire company. So I would say that's kind of a rough guideline as to how things work on a day. But as you said, every day is a little bit different.
Definitely. And don't forget about the office dogs.
Oh, that's right.
That's definitely one of the best parts.
Oh, yeah. I love dogs, and we have lots of them across the floors. Not too many, fortunately, but they're super, super cute and very easygoing. So I have to say it's the first office I've worked in with office dogs, and it's really amazing when you have a meeting. Sometimes can be a bit tense. Engineers get a bit heated when they discuss and want to debate. And it's actually amazing the effects a dog has in the sort of meeting. It just sort of calms everything down. And it's really nice add to have to the culture.
Definitely. So right now we have 3 offices, and soon we'll have a 4th one in Barcelona. Will that change anything in terms of the agile structure of the teams?
Yeah, so working in a distributed fashion, we're a hyper-growth company, and I think that's a really super exciting time. Now, the thing that we really strive to have in technology and product is really thinking about autonomy and alignment. So one of the things that we're trying to really prevent is having a distributed team working on the same sort of product. We know that that becomes a lot more difficult. You need a lot more sort of coordination. You need to have a lot more developed remote working practices, and you have to synchronize a lot more on things like working hours and making sure that things are sort of set. So for our sort of new office in Barcelona, what we've tried to do is really come up with an independent set of products that there'll be real full ownership of, and minimum dependencies with coordination from other departments in the business, and also minimum dependencies from other sort of product groups within sort of product and technology. So we're really excited about that because it means that we hope that Barcelona, our new Barcelona office, will be able to continue to build and iterate and evolve that product independently. And that means that they can move really rapidly, and we'll still make sure that there's a certain amount of alignment so we have consistency within the sort of product set, but it means that we can go really full speed as best as we can. I've worked with a lot of companies that have done distributed development. It's really tough, and we decided we don't want to sort of head towards that model right now. We may change that over time, but we really want to make sure that all teams can go full speed as fast as they can.
Definitely. And speaking of full speed, we are a bank, which means we're very heavily regulated. So does that slow down the deployment at all?
Yeah, regulation's a really interesting thing, and I was really fascinated about this before I came in. And I think what's really been interesting is that as a bank, we get audited quite a number of times. And I think it's really fascinating to understand what regulation is there for. And I've actually done a lot of consulting with more traditional banks when I worked in the UK. And I have to say, regulation, the way it's been implemented really slows everything down. So when I worked for a UK bank, for instance, we could only do a deployment every sort of 3 or 6 months per team. Yeah. So it's really, really slow. And what I'm really proud about our team is that we can do more than 120 deployments per week with the sort of size of the team that we have. And one of the interesting ways that we achieve that is, regulation's there to help us mitigate risk. And what we try to do is really think about what are the controls we want to demonstrate, but do it in a automated, clever fashion. So, with modern engineering practices like infrastructure as code, that helps us manage our sort of infrastructure, sort of servers and networks. It helps us sort of manage our security zones. We have got rigorous controls around that. We've got a really strong continuous delivery pipeline, which means that any change is really going through a series of sort of validated gates that you can't really skip, which is really easy to do if you have an army of people with checklists. People make mistakes, people forget about things. And I think that's, part of the beauty is that we've tried to really think about how we implement regulation in a new sort of fashion that allows us to really focus on automation. And I think automation really has helped us sort of scale. So in sort of the, I guess, more cloud-based organizations, they're kind of maybe used to this term, cattle, not pets. And this means that, we want servers to be sort of managed as if it was like lots and lots of them, not as if each one was a bespoke, crafted snowflake, which means a single point of failure. And I think we really look at how we do this with regulation, which is, how do we tap into really clever engineering practices that mean that you can't sort of bypass them, you can't make human mistakes, and it's automated so you never forget about it. And it means that we can then move with quality and speed.
Do you think that since we are a fully licensed bank and we are regulated, does that slow us down compared to our fintech competitors that don't necessarily have that regulation?
I don't actually think so. I think what's really interesting about the regulations is that I like to think about as quality assurance for our organization.
Definitely.
So, I think in a lot of good engineering places, quality is thought about as an important thing. And one of the philosophies of how we build software is really this lean mindset of building quality in from the beginning. And I think what happens to a lot of organizations as they grow is if you don't really think about quality, you don't end up with scalable processes. You end up with mistakes, and you have processes that kind of try to address how mistakes are made, but you don't really think about should that process have been invented in the first place and what can you do to avoid those types of mistakes. And that's how I kind of look about the regulations, is that it really helps us really think about our processes, about things that can help us optimize stuff. And it helps us build quality in even earlier, which means we can scale even faster. So, I think actually the regulations really help us guarantee the safety, security, and stability of the bank that we really want to offer our customers. And I think it really shows in the way that our teams can build things with confidence. So I think it actually helps us really go fast because it means that we're really thinking about quality from the very start.
And we're thinking about the product 5 years from now, not 5 days from now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so I know personally there's Java, there's Ruby, there's Python, but what do you recommend a young developer learn to really be competitive at getting a job at N26?
Yeah, so the technology landscape is massive. After working for 16 years in the industry, there's been 10, 15 different programming languages I've learned, or at least experienced. And I think for us, we're a sort of JVM-based environment. So we're moving away from Java to sort of Kotlin as the language adoption. So I think any sort of JVM-based language is really, really useful. But what I would really recommend for a lot of people to learn is really focus on sort of what we talk about here as engineering practices and culture. So I think regardless of whatever language you learn, what's really important for us is that you have really strong discipline around the essentials and principles behind engineering. So this means thinking about how well refactored code is and how easy it is to change, how testable is the code, and how well do we put automated tests around it so that we get fast feedback. We also really care about sort of the full life cycle of our software, so we do a lot of deployments into production, and we really want to make sure that we provide safety to our customers. And one of the ways is making sure that we have very observable software. So, we talk about engineering because we want our sort of programmers and developers to think holistically about how well that services are monitored and that we know about things that are going wrong before our customers do, so we can actually stop them from going wrong. And I think that's a really key essence, is that in a lot of other places, the focus is often on just programming and code. And this is where we actually ask people to think a lot broader around engineering as a discipline. And there's a lot of stuff out there, but I would always say focus on sort of principles from a practical perspective. Start off with a good sort of solid programming language. For us, the relevant one is really Java and Kotlin for most of our sort of backend services. And JavaScript is also a great one for the web. Everything is very much web-based as well today. So if you have any of those in your toolkit, I think you'll be set.
And so we use Java and Kotlin to keep a common stack.
Yeah, that's right. So we have our backend services, which are built in Java and Kotlin. So all of our services are deployed in sort of a JVM. And that allows us to have some consistency in our sort of platform, the way that we manage that. We do deploy all of our sort of images with Docker, which is kind of one of the common deployment tools in today's world, with sort of Jenkins using very traditional sort of continuous delivery pipelines. We do have some JavaScript-based stacks, so we have some internal applications. So one's currently at the moment built on Ember, web applications built on React. But the majority of our services are sort of built on the back end. And of course, with iOS and Android, we have Swift for our iOS platform and Kotlin in our Android world.
Okay, great. And so we are a digital bank and we are a digital company. So are our customers safe from something like a DDoS attack, a long power outage, or any type of other sustained network problems?
Yeah, so we're really conscious about making sure that we provide security and scalability for all of our clients. And I think what we've really tried to do is build in multi-layer sort of defense with our security sort of team and think about our architecture. So we are actually really lucky because as far as I know, we're the only sort of German bank to be based in the cloud. Right. And that gives us a lot more ability to sort of scale rapidly. So we don't have to think too much about like acquiring servers and thinking about contingency. And so we design our services with really thinking about that in mind of scalable sort of services. From sort of the DDoS and other sort of security things, we have a lot of sort of mechanisms of layers that help us prevent against that. So I can't talk about which ones in particular, but our security team really thinks about what are those layers to prevent us from lots of different attacks, because obviously money is an important thing we want to keep safe and is super important as a bank.
Definitely. So as you mentioned before, you've been doing this for a while and you've worn a lot of hats within and outside of the tech sector. And as you know, coding involves a lot of alone time, which is kind of how everyone gets started as an engineer. What are some things that a coder can do to be more social and still do what they love?
Yeah, there's an interesting thing between sort of maker mode, which is like this soul-focused thing. I think a lot of craftspeople will identify with this. When people are doing design or when people are thinking about a project that they really love, it's easy to throw yourself into that. What I would really highlight to a lot of people, give as advice, is that software is a team sport. So it's recognizing that the code that you write will be written or rewritten by other people, it'll be edited, and it's a shared kind of asset. It's not something that you alone work on. And I think it's helping people understand that. And I think there's safe ways that people can get better at developing some of these skills. So I'm a big fan of pair programming. I think some of our teams have even practiced, not regularly, but mob programming, which is actually working as a whole team.
Oh, wow, okay.
And then thinking about how do they evolve a bit of code, or at least review a bit of code to try to get sort of levels of feedback. But I think one of the biggest skills that I would really encourage people to have is actually building empathy. So I think this is a really underrated skill, is that when you're solving problems as a coder, it's very easy to come up with a solution. And when somebody has a different solution to the problem, that's where you get a lot of debate and heated discussion. And I think the easiest way to resolve that is having empathy for the other person. And it's really easy to say, but it's hard to sort of actually take up. And I think I was sort of taught very early in my career that when you actually solve a problem, there are always more than one way to solve that problem. And it's appreciating that there are different perspectives and different perhaps things that people are optimizing for. And a good way to actually start building empathy is actually to start asking questions. Why have you designed this solution this way? So rather than pushing your own solution, asking, how did you come up with that solution? Can you explain your story to me? And I think that goes miles to actually building empathy.
Yeah, definitely. You can also just learn something, because like you said, there's more than one way to answer something. And this person might completely change your perspective because they came up with something different.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so what are your book recommendations? And not necessarily about leadership and about code or products, but what are you reading?
So since I've started this job, I've actually started reading a lot more fiction.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so I used to read pretty much exclusively nonfiction.
Same.
And I think there's a couple of really great nonfiction books that I really recommend. So I'm a big fan of *Sapiens* I think some people sort of debate it, but I really love like how it explains the history of mankind, the generations and philosophies, and I think it's a really nice reflection and summary of us as a human civilization and the things that we go through. So that's like what I'd recommend from a non-fiction perspective. But I've been reading a couple of things around fiction recently. So I read Wizard from Earthsea. So Ursula Le Guin, I think she passed away earlier this year, and in tribute to her, she's a really amazing sci-fi writer. Okay, cool. And yeah, I really enjoyed that book recently.
Okay, cool. Okay, and biggest challenge and accomplishment so far, it can be personal or professional.
Ooh.
That one's a tough one.
That is a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge for me was actually stepping away from consulting into a role. Okay. So after I'm into this management role that I have. So I think after 14 years doing consulting, there are pros and cons to every role. And I think one of the interesting things about consulting is you sort of give up seeing lots of different environments and sort of trading things off and sort of advising and influencing from the side. And so I think the hardest thing for me was actually stepping into a place where, I know that I will make mistakes. I know that I've made mistakes. You can talk to my team about this. And that's okay, and I have to live with the consequences. And I think that's an interesting thing which you as a consultant don't really have. And I think this is one of the reasons I started reading a lot more sort of fiction, is that, I think dealing with a sort of management role versus a consulting role, it's a personally difficult situation of, dealing with some of the stresses and challenge, but also trying to really help the company excel and the people excel. And so it's a delicate balance where it's also a sort of leadership tip, I think, which is you also have to take care of yourself to create space for you to have, mental recovery time.
Definitely.
So that you can continue to deal with, exciting challenges and help the company grow.
Definitely. And then biggest accomplishment so far?
So I'm really proud about the book that I wrote called Talking with Tech Leads. Okay. So I think one of the things I'm very passionate about in technology is when people move from what I talk about maker mode to multiplier mode. Everyone who's been writing code as an engineer, they often think, I'll get more senior because I'll have more complex problems and I get to solve those problems. But as soon as they step into a leadership role, and I think this is particular for engineers, is that it's almost very seldom that a lot of the skills they develop as an engineer transfer into leadership. So as you talked about with the sort of social skills and leading skills, it's not something that is encouraged or developed or needed necessarily from an engineer. I would argue good engineers need it, but it's not something that people are taught. And there's a sort of shock factor of people transitioning into that. And I think one of the things I'm very proud that I've sort of accomplished is like talking to people, raising awareness around this, and also building a course around it. So it's actually something that I've been running internally with our sort of people who are existing tech leads and people who are on their path from senior into these leadership roles, because when you drop people into these roles that they're not prepared for, they get anxious, they have stress, and they completely feel alone. And I think that's a huge shock for a lot of engineers when they move into that. And I think what I've been able to do is create a space of safety, start to have people aware about what are the skills that they need before they find themselves in that position, so they don't feel like they're sort of suddenly drowning in expectations that they don't know what is expected of them. And that's a really personal topic that I feel I've accomplished quite well.
Yeah, definitely. I think people skills is something you can teach someone that, but they definitely need practice with that.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think the thing is you never finish it. Like it's never perfect.
It's never done, actually. Yeah.
And I think that's a huge thing, right? So I think with engineering, you often get this binary, it's green or red or it's yes or no. And I think with people, you never ever know, right?
Exactly. So. In an organization our size with so many people from so many different places, like it's a beautiful challenge.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Okay, so now we're going to take a few questions from the comments. This first question is from Gideon. What is the biggest strength of the N26 app?
So I think one of the biggest strengths of the N26 app is that one of our company values is about simplicity. And I think this is really demonstrated in our latest release of product called Spaces. So in a traditional place, thinking about how you manage money is often a very complex thing. And I think what I really love about our company is that we have design and product and technology really working closely together, which in a lot of technology companies are often very separate divisions. There's a lot of like conflicts. And what I really love here is that this intermingling of different disciplines means that we can trade off technology with user experience and understand what users would like to have. And I think that's the biggest strength of what we really try to achieve in our app, is really bringing simplicity to how people manage their finances, how they deal with things. We're continually thinking about how do we simplify this experience, which is often convoluted with financial terms and things that the average people have to learn before they even start thinking about what they do with it. And what we can do is bring this simplistic design of managing finance really easy. So if you haven't used Spaces, I definitely recommend it. It's really easy. You just create a new space and you can drag money from one space to the other, and you can have a focus about where you use that. And I think that's a real good example about the strengths of what we have.
Yeah, definitely. I also enjoyed the goal setting on Spaces as well. Yep. So now I'm going to Thailand in December, and I'm at 40%. And it's a nice little achievement to check in every time. Yeah. And see I'm getting closer and closer.
That's great.
Yeah, it's really nice. Okay, so this is from Ryan. What cloud platforms do you use? AWS, Google, Azure, etc.
So we're actually on AWS. So we have evaluated the other platforms, but we're on the AWS platform. I think we've tried to design things so we're not coupled to a particular platform, and we try to minimize that as much as possible.
Okay, definitely. And you kind of alluded to this in the last question, but how do we invest in research? Or do we?
Yeah, so, I think unlike a normal, maybe established company like IBM, which has tons of money and, I don't know how they make money, but they have lots of money and cash, they can afford whole departments of research and things like that. And I think what I really love about our team is that we have this kind of get stuff done mentality, pragmatism. We're really passionate about shipping things. And one of the things that we have at N26 is this thing called Get Stuff Done Days. So every 6 weeks, the next one's actually, I think, next week. We always send out this email on the Monday. Thursdays and Fridays is then Get Stuff Done Days. And basically teams can choose what they would like to do, or individuals can choose what they'd like to do on that sort of day. So, it's a day for people to sort of hack around and play around with something. Some people do online courses. Other people get together and do a sort of workshop of some sort. And other people sort of play around with what things could actually come out of the product. And through these are the sort of organic ideas of what our team has of doing research around that. We do also invest in a sort of user research phase, and that's how we really focus on the simplicity. So there's a whole design thing where we talk about what is the goal of and what are the pain points of our customers and what can we do to actually achieve that. But from a technical perspective, I really love our Get Stuff Done days, and it's really amazing what our teams actually accomplish as part of that and some of the ideas that come out of that.
Definitely. I will say that I'm on the marketing team and we actually subscribe to it now, and it's really nice.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. This one is from Valley. How do you define N26 work culture?
Yeah, culture is an interesting one. So, it's constantly evolving, I think, is one of the big things. And I think for us, as we grow with new offices, that'll also have an impact on culture. But I think one of the things that I would say about our current culture is that we're definitely very diverse. So in technology, we have at least, I think, 40 different nationalities from everywhere. And I think that's really exciting to understand where people come from, to understand how people have different preferences and how they sort of work together. And I'm a big believer that having strong diversity means that you create better solutions as a result, because you have more different ways of sort of thinking. I kind of talked a little bit before about, I think from a product and technology perspective, we have this sort of get stuff done mentality. And I think one of the things that really drives that is that, we're also consumers of the product that we create, right?
Definitely.
And in technology, we have this saying, I don't know how well it translates, is eat your own dog food. And it's this thing about the thing that you create, you also consume, right? So if it's good, you like more of it and you do well as a result. And I think that's a huge motivator for a lot of our teams. It's really exciting when you sort of build something and then you see the result of that sort of product, and then you can use it and then your friends and family get to use it. It's a really motivating thing. And I really get excited whenever we launch anything like that. That really drives our sort of the get stuff done mentality. I think the other side, which I really love about our culture here, is that we have this kind of, we are a startup. And I think one of the great things about startups is that we get to challenge the way that things are done. And so we really challenge the way that regulation gets done. We're constantly looking at, we use agile sort of practices to think about how we continually improve. So retrospectives are very standard on all our teams. I use it in our sort of management groups to make sure that we think about, what are the smells that we detect? What can we do to improve that? And how do we continually get better? And I think that's a really exciting thing about our sort of culture.
Cool. This one is from Jasper. Do you work with consultants or freelancers to scale up your development?
So all of our people that we have at N26 are all in-house. So we don't really work with sort of contractors from that particular side.
Definitely. Okay, so we only have time for one more question.
Okay.
How does N26 plan to encourage innovation now and in the future? Are you more likely to invest in new departments internally or acquire startups as subsidiaries?
Yeah, so I'll never say never. And so I think the current strategy is that, we've got lots and lots of ideas in our sort of backlog. And I think for us, we have this real good feedback cycle between, when we release a product, we have a lot of data to understand how users interact with the product. And then we have our sort of user research design team to understand what are the problems that our customers have, or what are the problems that they haven't yet sort of have a solution to solve, and then we try to actually think about that. So I think our strategy at the moment will be more about sort of in-house. We might definitely think about sort of longer term partnering with other sort of companies for things, but we have so much talent in here is that I don't understand why we wouldn't tap into that first, because there's so much of that we already use. And it's really using that first rather than going to acquisitions or anything like this.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Kelly.
If you're interested to know more about our open positions, please visit us at n26.com/careers. If you want to visit our YouTube channel, search for N26 and search our video series Inside N26. And Pat, where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Pat Kua, but for those of you located in North America and maybe on the East Coast, I'll actually also be making a visit to our New York office and hosting an evening meetup on August 21st, where I'll be talking about building evolutionary architectures. How do you think about architecting systems for change? So please visit our Facebook site for some more details around that.
And of course, follow us on social media. We're on Twitter at N26Careers and at N26 and Instagram at N26. See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.